was. What prompted you to write your Letters to a Young Brother book, and what kind of feedback did you initially get? Like, was it a really powerful message first off, or did it come about?
You know, Letters to Young Brother is out of my 4 books, the book that I'm most proud of, you know, because it's the first book. And I wrote that because I was doing a lot of speaking at different high schools, colleges, different places, and a lot of young men would come up to me and have all these questions after I would talk. And the more I started to look at it, there was a real dearth of motivational material for teenage boys. It just wasn't there. There was a decent amount for teenage girls, but there wasn't anything for boys. And then I actually got this idea, well, let me write something for young men, because most of their questions fell into certain buckets, whether it was about life or school or girls or whatever, right? So let me write something that could be kind of cool. There was a book that I read when I was young called Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke, who was a German poet, right? That book was very motivational to me. Now, that book, just the way it's written, a lot of guys today would be like, you know? So could I write a Letters to a Young Poet, the same style and same formula, but for a much more modern reader? And that was the goal. And so that's why I wrote that book. And, you know, I went to pitch the book to publishing companies. Their initial reaction was absolutely not. And it talks about, you know, some institutional prejudice. They said, no, you're pitching us a book for a population that doesn't read. You know, young men, particularly young men of color, they're not reading books and blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying, you know, what's interesting about it, it's a chicken-egg problem. You've decided they're not reading books, so you're not putting out any books for them to read, so therefore it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that they're not reading any books. But what if you publish something that they'd be interested in reading? What if you publish something that says, this is for you, and you're going to like it because it's cool and it's good? That Letters to a Young Brother, you know, hit the New York Times bestsellers list. You know, so it proved them wrong in a way. So I'm very proud of that book.
Awesome. I know you changed career paths. And I was just wondering, what made you decide to change career paths? And how did your parents support you in your decisions?
Okay. You know, I didn't really change career paths. I changed in a way I didn't do as a professional what I studied. Let's put it that way. Because I never really practiced law. So I didn't start practicing law and then change. But I did. You know, I went and got a law degree. And I also got my master's from the Kennedy School of Government. So, and then neither of those degrees speak to acting. And what's interesting about that is that I think that I do talk a lot about we get fed information that I think is false. Most of us have been taught that you're supposed to study what you're going to do as a career. I think that's not true. I think that what you should study is whatever you're interested in, and then allow yourself to be a fully formed, exploratory person who ends up doing whatever they want to do, right? Just because you get a law degree does not mean you have to practice law. Just because you get a medical degree does not mean you have to be a surgeon or a doctor. Just because you study and get a degree in education or history does not mean you have to be a professor or an educator, right? You can do whatever you want, but you can study whatever you want to. And that's why education is so important. To me, it's the most important foundational tool. But you don't then have to get stuck with, I studied this, so I have to do this. You know, I was in a repertory company during law school, so I was still doing theater, but I wasn't necessarily getting a degree in it, which I think in certain ways has made me a better actor, right? Because all the skills and different things I learned from law school, I apply in my characters as an actor. And what's ironic, though, I've never ever played a lawyer, ever, in my career. I don't know when it's going to happen. I really want to someday. But no one's ever hired me to play a lawyer, and it really upsets me. Maybe I would have been a horrible lawyer, because no one even lets me act like a lawyer. And I tell them I got a law degree. I'm like, I could really be a good lawyer. But they're like, no, you're horrible.
Do you draw any inspiration from your parents?
I do. You know, both of my parents were physicians, and I really... You know, the character I play on CSI New York, his name is Dr. Hawks, and so he's a doctor. I would actually call my mom, when I'm playing more traditional doctors, I've played a number of doctors before, so I would call her and ask her about medical terms and things like that. But, you know, they both inspire me because they really were two people. My father passed away, but my mother's still alive. And there were two people that really committed to really making the world a better place. You know, why else are we here? What's your purpose? And they really want me to ask those questions. They really encouraged me to ask, you know, what are you doing here? Are you just here to take up space? Or are you here to add something? You know, this is precious, precious time. And how are you going to use it? If it's true that this world is 15 billion years old, you know, and you're here for, let's say, if you're lucky, 100 of that, that's like less than a snap. How are you going to use it? And what are you going to do with it? And that's really what they encouraged me, how they wanted me to look at my life.
There may have been a name change from Francis to Hill. What is the meaning behind this decision, and when did you change your name?
Well, Wikipedia had me as Francis, which is not true. It's interesting. You know, you can put anything on Wikipedia, right? And so Wikipedia had me as Francis. I'm not sure why, but they did. I used to use the name. Here's the thing. Sometimes when you stay places and you're in a town, so let's say it's a small town, people would know what hotel you're in, and you don't. You know, the people out there that call you, you know, and things like, hi, is this Hill Harper? So you don't use most people don't use their real names. So I used to use the name Francis Cage as the name that I would stay under, right? So, yeah, I wouldn't stay in my room as Hill Harper. I'd stay in my room as Francis Cage. So maybe that's how they got it. I don't know where it came from, but Francis was never my name. But my whole name, my whole legal name is Frank Eugene Hill Harper. Hill comes from my mother's side of the family. My mother's Marilyn Hill. And Frank comes from my father's side of the family. My father's younger brother, his name was Frank. And Eugene is my grandmother's first name on my mother's side. Her name was Eugenia. And so most second sons, I'm a second son. Oftentimes, Southern tradition is that you give the second son the mother's maiden name as a first name.
Dr. King came to North Central in 1960, so 53
Really?
years ago.
No,
Came here.
yeah.
Oh, you didn't know that?
What?
Okay, well,
Sorry.
then you're kind of, it'll be a little
Awesome.
off guard.
Where did he
but
speak?
He spoke in Pfeiffer Hall, which is about 2 blocks down.
Why am I not speaking in Pfeiffer Hall?
Because this one's prettier.
This one's
It is.
newer.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And it's pretty.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, they gave you the best. But, well, now, just having learned that, what does it feel like to speak at a location where Dr. King spoke?
You know what? I spoke, the first honorary doctorate I ever received was from Tougaloo College in Jackson, Mississippi. And there's a church. It's a very old school, an old HBCU. And I spoke in that church where Dr. King spoke, and I was so moved. You know, I recently did a documentary about Dr. King that I produced and narrate for BET. And that documentary, I learned so much about him and really got to really get inside interviewing people that knew him and his fraternity brothers and all sorts of things. It was just fascinating. I have just so much respect and awe for Dr. King and someone who literally committed every fiber of his being to making the world better. You know, some of us, you know, attempt to do it and do our best, but this is somebody who committed his entire life to that, and so the fact that he's been here just makes me feel that much better.
Great. And then, from what we hear, you've been a kind of a jet setter today, and you will continue on to tonight.
Yes.
It's a busy day for you, but it's Martin Luther King Day. It's Inauguration Day for the
Yes.
second time for your friend.
Yes.
What is it like to see that he's now in his second term as first African American president in the U.S. from a personal standpoint? What's that like for you?
Well, I'll tell you. First of all, it being Inauguration Day as well as MLK Day is just it makes me so proud of this country. We live in the greatest country in the world, and you know we can have a lot of infighting and a lot of bickering and a lot of disagreement about politics, but you cannot discount or disagree with our democracy and the fact that I feel incredibly patriotic. I feel so proud of our country. I feel so proud of its history. As complicated as our history of our country, we've gotten through things and not let our disagreements tear the country apart. it seems that, I couldn't be more proud. And so today's the day about pride and celebration to me. That's what an inauguration day is. And it was interesting. I was listening to something and just really thinking that hopefully these images are beamed around the world, that for all the pomp and circumstance that Inauguration Day represents, every 4 years you see pride in democracy, no matter who's elected, right? Because it's a beautiful ceremony. And so let me say that. And then on the more personal side, I have always, I've known our president for, well over 20 years, and I've always known his commitment and his intelligence and, him wanting to make this world a better place. I think that just in terms of legacy as a president, you need 8 years to do that. I think there's very few presidents we can point to there's certain presidents that obviously are extremely well known that have been assassinated and things like that. But in terms of serving out your entire term, having 8 years to actually do things, really the second term is going to determine, I think, his legacy. And so it would have been a shame to me for him not to have the opportunity to have a second term. So I couldn't be more proud of that, and I couldn't be more proud of our country for giving him that opportunity.